So welcome everyone to our chapter 11 of Kohelet Ecclesiastes. We only have two more chapters left of the book. We'll do one today and one next time. These are short chapters, and then we will be done with this whole book. And we really have gone.
It's amazing.
Great depth. Yeah, really amazing. We've studied this book in great depth.
Yeah. Usually we start something, it takes 4 years to go through.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not a very long book, but it's not a short book either. We can really begin even today, because these are short chapters, talking about, well, what's our overall thoughts about all of it, and where does it leave us, and what does it teach us, and what's its wisdom, and why is this one of our books of the Bible? Why is this one of these books that are read by billions worldwide? Billions. Okay, so we're going to begin, unless anyone has any comments or thoughts left over from last week, or just in general related to our study. Chapter 11 of the book of Ecclesiastes. Here we go. Wait, not there. Let's see. Share my screen, but somehow it's not allowing me. Yeah, let's see. Why is this happening? There we go. When I said, why is this happening, that could have easily been Kohelet.
Yeah.
Why is this happening? All this technology is futile. Okay, so here we go. And Alan, please get us going.
Okay, chapter 11. Send your bread forth upon the waters, for after many days you will find it. Distribute portions to 7 or even to 8, for you cannot know what misfortune may occur on earth. If the clouds are filled, they will pour down rain on the earth. And if a tree falls to the south or to the north, the tree will stay where it falls. If one watches the wind, he will never sow. And if one observes the clouds, he will never reap. Just as you do not know how the life breath passes into the limbs within the womb of the pregnant woman, so you cannot foresee the actions of God, who causes all things to happen. Sow your seed in the morning, and don't hold back your hand in the evening, since you don't know which is going to succeed, the one or the other, or if both are equally good. How sweet is the light! What a delight for the eyes to behold the sun. Even if a man lives many years, let them enjoy himself in all of them, remembering how many the days of darkness are going to be. The only future is nothingness. O youth, enjoy yourself while you are young. Let your heart lead you to enjoyment in the days of your youth. Follow the desires of your heart and the glances of your eyes, but know well that God will call you to account for all such things, and banish care from your mind and pluck sorrow out of your flesh, for youth and black hair are fleeting.
Thank you.
Started out a little happier, but it got sour towards the end.
A little sour, yeah. Not it's been more sour, but it's still, but it's a more balanced chapter in terms of that point of view of Kohelet's mood, and of the import of his message. So what's he saying? This is a little bit hard to understand, but Send your bread forth upon the waters, for after many days you will find it. Distribute portions to 7 or even to 8, for you cannot know what misfortune may occur on earth. So one way of understanding it, Rashi, what he says is, well, give. What does it mean? Distribute portions to 7 or even to 8. Keep giving, to give away portions to other people, because you don't know what could happen to you later in life, and they may be able to help you later in life. And then the first verse then means similarly, send your bread upon the waters to other people. Give your bread out, because after many days you might find it comes back to you. Be generous with other people. Is there another way of understanding these verses? Anybody see them differently?
No, that's the only way I can see it, because whatever you send out will probably come back to you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm as confused by the first verse as I am whenever I've heard someone say, was it cast your bread upon the waters?
This is the one. That's where it comes from.
Maybe just because I'm a very concrete person, but taking a piece of bread or a chunk of bread or whatever, and you throw it on the waters. I mean, it just seems, I'm sorry, it's like,
It's not a good image.
It's going to get soggy. It's not going to be good for anything. I always grapple with what the heck does that mean?
Well, is he really talking about bread, or is it referring to something else?
It's really it says bread, cast your bread. I mean, bread can be symbolism for a lot of things, but I agreed with the message, cast your bread upon the waters. When you find it many days later, you're not going to want to eat your bread. I mean, that's
Right.
So here's the thought out of left field. It kind of popped into my head. What if it's referring to feeding nature, like, wildlife and fowl and that sort of thing? Cast your bread upon the waters. And, then you may have, teeming wildlife near you.
You're helping the whole ecosystem. It could be that for the ancients, what was water? Water was once you threw something in the water, it was gone, right? That might be in the sense that if you throw something into the sea, you're not going to get it back, or into the river, into the lake, or the water is symbolic of something going away from you. If you throw something on the ground, you can get it. So casting your bread on the waters doesn't sound like a very smart thing to do, because you're not going to recover your bread. But it's saying, go ahead and do it. Throw your bread in the waters. Give your bread to something that may not seem rewarding. It might give it back to you after many days, right? Many days could be many days, right? Giving your bread to someone who will never be able to give it back to you, you think, but maybe 10 years down the line, when you're hungry, he'll cast his bread at you.
Even not taking it concretely, the line creates a mood, and the mood is a kind of mood of sadness for some reason. I mean, he touches something, forgetting about what the words mean or what the symbols are. And I think it has to do somehow with recurrence. That somehow, if you do an action now, it might come back. There's a sense of recurrence, maybe endless recurrence in this line. I think that's why people are attached to it, because the concrete content of the thing isn't very, very special, but the mood it creates is.
Wonderful.
Question.
I would.
I'm sorry. And good morning to everybody. I apologize for being late. The tradition of Tashlich at High Holy Days, is that at all related to this verse, or is that just a separate tradition with its with a separate underpinning idea?
It's a separate verse. It's a verse from Micah, which has the word tashlich in it. But it is interesting, right? That it's maybe the idea of, I have to look that up because that verse does not mention bread. You know, the verse from Micah does not mention bread. It talks about casting all your sins away. And so here we're talking about, this is really sending your bread. So there could be, I wonder if there's
Blessings. This seems more like blessings, right? If you send your bread, which is nourishing and sustaining, you disseminate it in whatever way you can disseminate it, with the idea that the good that you pay forward is going to come back to you through karma or something similar, right? I mean, that's kind of how I'm seeing it. But Alan, I get it. You know, if you put bread on water, it gets mushy. I get it. I get where you're coming from as well.
I think that I had the same question in mind actually as Nancy's, and although I knew the Tashlich verse didn't speak of bread, I couldn't help but think about that. But that wasn't my point. If you have to read the verse together with the next verse, give a share to 7, even to 8, or actually I'm looking at Alter, I'm sorry. Distribute portions to 7, even to 8, well, the same idea. And I haven't looked at the medieval commentators, but Alter mentions that the proposal of Rashi, Ibn Ezra, and other medieval commentators, that the references to acts of charity, which is the reason I mentioned this second verse, is perfectly plausible because perform acts of beneficence. You never know when you yourself may benefit from having done them. So I can sort of see the sadness that that David finds in the verse taken on its own. But I think on the whole, it makes sense to say good things may come, spread it out. And Alter has another comment that I can't resist telling you about, which is, or reading to you, actually. It says, the sending out of bread on the waters is surely not advice about overseas investment, as some commentators have imagined. I don't know who they are, but I just thought that was very funny.
Well, the earliest, one of the earliest commentators, one can say, is the Aramaic translation, right? The Targum, and they talk it. He links it to the poor. It's about sending bread forth upon the waters to the poor. That's how he
his gloss on it is actually specifically about the poor. Then
about the poor. He adds to it.
So bread is money.
Yeah. Right.
Bread is often, or flour is money. But it's interesting because to look at this effect, going back to what David was saying as well, which is in that sense of the circulus, that's a circle, right? Nature of the image. It brings us back to maybe there's a season for everything, and to that whole line of thinking and of tropes within the book, which one also, some of the nature imagery within this chapter and within other chapters does have a kind of wonderful feeling of just the movements of nature, the cycles, the rhythms, the clouds are filled, the rain is going to pour. I mean, somehow it gives us a poetic sensation of experiencing both the life and death, which is part of life and nature, obviously, and also contemplating our own place within those rhythms. And so casting forth bread upon the waters, it's a strange image, but somehow it really speaks deeply, because it's something one would never do. I mean, unless it's tashlich, why would you ever throw bread into the water? But again, to the ancients, it could be very well, as the medieval commentators and others are saying, that this was a common, this was an easy to understand a metaphor from their point of view. They just instinctively understood what that meant. Well, for us, at least in my mind, I imagine myself throwing a piece of bread into a little stream. That's what comes into mind for me, and that's poetic, because you'll never recover the bread, maybe, even though it tells you you're going to find it. All right, Morris, you're about to say something?
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking of this more that that's actually somebody is sending, like, like flour on a ship, and sending it off because I guess I think of that because of the second line, because it's saying distribute portions to 7 or even to 8, because you cannot know what misfortune may occur on earth. So I mean, if you're sending flour, on a ship, to other people, it's a way of distributing the the wealth that you have, and
Yeah.
would help people. So
Well, there.
I
Go
was
ahead.
going to say also the number 8 refers to the 8 points on the compass, right? North, south, east, west, northeast, southeast. So I also thought about that when the number 8 was mentioned. 7, I understand, is a number of completion, right? But 8, why are they hesitating between 7 or even to 8, right? Why even mention the 8 unless there was a significance to the number 8? And that's what I thought of, Morris. I thought of cardinal points on a compass. That's all I want to say.
Interesting. Well, could be, and I mean, 8 is even more than the number of completion. 7 is a unit, right? 7 days of the week. But on Hanukkah, right, the 8, you have the 8 candles, right? The 8 is even more the number of completion. It's the full. It's even beyond completion. It's like Mashiach, It's like it's going even beyond what you're supposed to. So, 7 is a full number, but even to 8, it's go even beyond in your giving and your generosity. It's actually a very nice advice. I mean, it's got a nice feeling to be asking us to do this. Let's move on, unless anybody wanted to keep talking about the verse 2. So if the clouds are filled, they will pour down rain on the earth. And if a tree falls to the south or to the north, the tree will stay where it falls. If one watches the wind, he will never sow, and if one observes the clouds, he will never reap. The 2 verses may be saying different things. What's the first one saying to you? So, consequence, right? We live in a world of consequence. Usually when the clouds are full of rain, it's going to rain. It's be aware, be watchful. And when the tree falls, that's where it goes. Don't expect a tree to fall in somewhere else if that's where it's fallen. The kind of like the inevitability of life. Things just happen. You can't expect life not to take its course. Maybe this is where it's also from an imagery point of view, linked to the bread on the water or other images, but it's nature just works its way, right? In your life, you're going to grow old, and you're going to life has a way of just being, things happen, right? If the clouds are filled, it's going to rain. If the armies amass, they'll probably invade. Does this verse strike anybody differently?
It feels like the first verse is like very concrete. If the clouds fill, well, rain's going to come down. If a tree falls down, it's going to stay where it is, whether it falls north or south. But the second line, I look at that as, it's almost like if you dream, if you just watch the wind, or you just observe the clouds, and you don't do anything else, but kind of have a daydream, well, then you're never going to reap the benefits of and you'll never sow. because you'll be busy dreaming.
Waiting for the right moment, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's those two verses complement each other well, because one is saying life is just inevitable, right? It's going to rain if the clouds are full, but the other is saying don't keep watching the clouds, wondering if it's going to rain, so not sowing, because then you're never going to reap, right? You can't just wait. Sometimes you just got to do what you got to do, right?
Don't forecast, don't try to forecast the weather. Just get down to your business. Otherwise you won't reap, because God is in charge of everything.
Beautiful, right? God is in charge of everything, and you don't know how it's going to happen. And if you wait, if you're always worried it's going to rain before you sow, or it's too windy, or you're just never going to get down to what you need to do. On the other hand, don't be a fool and think, well, the clouds are all dark and there's a storm, so I'm going to go out to sea and ride my ship. You gotta live between those two. You gotta be active and out in the world and doing things and not waiting for the perfect time. But you also have to not be a fool and do something that expect the world to be different than it is. Which is very good advice, probably.
He also brings the persona, the author, whatever, brings it back to the idea of wind, right? You can't catch the wind. And I believe the word is ruach. Am I reading that correctly in there? And then clouds, you can't catch a cloud. I mean, so the images here are the same images that have been used throughout the book, right? The ephemerality of wind and cloud, which is water vapor, right? And so keep your mind not on the ephemeral, not on the wind. Keep your mind focused on what you can control, because you can't control the wind and you can't control the rain when it comes or how the clouds form. But you still got to eat.
Yes, yeah.
Still got to eat.
As Bonnie said,
sow and reap.
It all comes from God, and it's all ephemeral, it's all temporal, and so it's do what you got to do, but don't expect that you'll understand it or be able to predict it, or ascribe it too much meaning, perhaps.
Or keep it in its place as something you can't control. So stop trying to.
Yeah.
Accept the fact that you cannot control the wind and you cannot control the clouds.
So the verb in the Hebrew for shomer ruach can also mean to guard the wind, right? Like the shomer Yisrael, the guardian of Israel, right? So it's kind of an active word, it's like, how can you guard the wind? How can you, here it says if one watches the wind, but it's try to grab the wind. It's not going to work. It's an impossible thing to do, as you were saying. Okay, verse 5. Just as you do not know how the life breath passes into the limbs within the womb of the pregnant woman, so you cannot foresee the actions of God who causes all things to happen.
That's kind of a troublesome statement. How do the rabbis explain that?
Well, do
God
you know
causes all things to happen.
the ruach? He's mentioning ruach again in this particular verse, and it has to do with life breath. And he's also going to talk about, in the last chapter, he's going to talk about ruach and what happens to the ruach Elohim after you die. So my sense is this is God, this is the ruach passing into the fetus. And it's associated with the divinity with God, which is going to pass out of you, and you shouldn't cling to it when you die, which is going to be in the next chapter. So I think he's getting, my sense is he's getting into some of his metaphysics about the Ruach Elohim, what it does, how it works, when it comes and when it goes.
It's interesting, as you say, that when I first read this verse, my thought was, well, you know, we know a little bit better than Kohelet what happens inside a pregnant woman, right? With the advances in medicine, we understand how life forms within the womb, and this is something that's not as much of a mystery to us as it was to the ancients. On the other hand, when the life breath, you know, when the soul comes into a body, if you believe in the soul, that is still one of the great questions that animates religion, and which really becomes a big political issue, right? And abortion and other questions for religious people. But you know, we still don't know when that spark of God, when does it come into the fetus, or how it comes into the fetus, or how that happens. And we understand how a fetus forms within a pregnant woman, but if you believes in the soul, when does the soul come? At what point in the pregnancy? I mean, that's a big theological debate, but also does underline that even with all our advances in medicine, there's still so much we don't know about. And it was when my wife was pregnant both times, a thought that came to me often was still, you know, despite everything we know about medicine and how much we're able to do, you know, childbirth and pregnancy is still a process in which we have very little control and ability to affect, and it still very much happens in a very primordial way. And it's still a wonder of nature, you know, and we understand it, but we don't have much control over it. And even in our day and age, there's still a lot of risks to to mothers, and it's still a big unknown. We're not unknown, but a big element out of our control.
Well, even if you get to know the total analytic progression of the fetus at every level, you're still going to have a question as to its animating. What animates it? I mean, the total analytic of the thing is only material. What animates the thing, whether you call it a soul or whether you call it the animating force or whatever it is a real thing. It's not just imaginary, because just as a physical thing, it's not worth very much.
It's interesting, right? Even if you don't call it a soul, even if you just call it consciousness, right?
Right, sure.
When does it become a living being that we ascribe that life to? And that's the same question on some level.
I'm seeing this verse slightly differently. I'm seeing this verse as an affirmation that women, right, who carry life, who create life, who bring forth life, are at some level mistresses of creation, right? Because the miracle of imbuing the limbs with a soul comes through our bodies. And that is as close to being godlike as human beings can even attempt to be in this existence down here under the sun, right? So I'm seeing it as very affirming, Norma. I'm not seeing it as negative toward women. I'm seeing an affirmation of life here.
I didn't say that.
I'm sorry, I did not understand then.
I didn't say that. You just totally ignored what I said, by the way. I said that I want to know how rabbis explain when bad things happen. I'm saying that God causes all things to happen, and then all of a sudden it was just disregarded.
I didn't realize you were talking about the second half of the verse.
Well, I was.
Okay.
I have to say I had been hoping to say that Norma's question, which I did understand, had been somehow set aside, and I thought it was an
Right.
important
Well,
question.
it was
I-
really
Now,
good.
as for the,
I interrupted her, I'm sorry.
no,
I
I'm,
also apologize. Let's answer Norma's question.
I mean, so I mean, this is what our tradition believes. Our tradition, I mean, it believes different things. It believes we have free will, but it also believes that all things come from God, good and evil. So,
How do rabbis explain that? That something bad happens, it's God, I
yeah,
don't think it's God's fault.
I mean, I mean, so we say in our prayers right after the Baruch Hu, right? We say, you know, praise are you, God, who makes good, who makes light and who makes darkness and creates everything. And everything is darkness and good. And the verse itself that blessing is based on is a verse from the prophet Isaiah, who says, who creates darkness, who makes light and darkness and makes evil. The God even
Yes.
makes evil, makes ra. So there is a sense that, you know, if God made everything, God also made evil. And I think it's a really, I mean, maybe you have to bring it with the verse before, which is we can't understand why, I mean, what we call evil, God made it. I mean, it makes no sense to us. But if you say God didn't create it, then you're in the bind, because you're saying God isn't completely all powerful, or God isn't completely
Or God isn't one.
Okay.
There's some alternative God that does the evil thing, and we
Yeah.
don't like to think that.
right.
I think about, and this makes me think of the birth of my son Sam. When Bev was pregnant, you know, she wanted to have a midwife, you know, deliver, and you know, so we planned for her to have a midwife there. And then she was in labor for like 36 hours, and you know, it wasn't going to happen. So at least, you know, to have like a natural, you know, birth. So she ended up having a cesarean. So, I mean, you kind of think that everything is going to work out, you know, you plan for it, but you can't always foresee how it turns out, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, fortunately, you know, he was born, and you know, they did say that he was kind of, you know, dusky, so we had to live with a monitor for 6 months, and
Wow.
that kind of drove us crazy, because it
Well,
would go off sometimes for no reason, you know.
Well, I will, and you know, I think to Norma's point and connecting to what Moore's saying, you know, it's very, 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 very hard, especially in moments where you see bad things happening, to say that comes from God too, or that is very, very hard. You know, it takes, you know, when something mildly bad happens, maybe you can say, okay, that came from God. When something horrible happens to you, it is incredibly hard to say that also comes from God. That is a really, really, really challenging thing to say. You know, there's a famous story, which, you know, you can't quote to people who are going through a very, very hard time and say, well, it also comes from God. But it's an interesting story about Rabbi Akiva. So this is what the rabbis say about it. So Rabbi Akiva is one of the first rabbis, right? And so he's walking in the field, and it's getting to be late at night, and he has with him a few animals, and he tries to go into a hotel, or, you know, the equivalent of a hotel, and he says, do you have any lodging left? And they say, sorry, Rabbi, we're all booked for the night. He says, well, there's nowhere I can go. Sorry, nothing we can do. So he says, Gam zu l'tova. This is also for the good. So then he goes out into the field, and he says, well, I guess I'm just going to lie down and sleep in the field. And then a gust of wind comes and blows out his candle. And he says, okay, you know, what am I supposed to do now? I can't see anything. He says, Gam zu l'tova. This is also for the good. And then he had, you know, a dog, or maybe it was a rooster, I can't remember, with him, and suddenly some other animal comes and scares away his animal. And he says, Gam zu l'tova. This is also for the good. And then while he's sleeping all alone, having lost all of that in the middle of the night, I think it's a horde of Romans come and plunder the place where he was about to sleep and kill everybody. And so he realizes, okay, he was saved because if he would have had an animal that would have made noise, or if he would have had a candle, or if he made a fire, he would have been, he would have been caught up in that. So you can't always say such a thing, but that's part of the thinking of the rabbis, which is you never know why things happen. You can't understand the cause of why things happen the way they do. And sometimes, this is my own perspective, I don't think it works for everybody, but sometimes you just have to say, I can't understand why all these things are happening or happened. And there's it's a very difficult question. On one hand, we have free will as human beings, and on one hand, God causes all things to happen. So which is it? But somehow both of those are true at the same time, and that's one of the big mysteries of theology and of religion. That somehow, the Talmud says, there's nothing that God does not do. And nothing that we really can do. We have no free will. The only thing we can decide to do is whether we have awe of heaven or not, right? The only thing we can decide is how we react to situations on one level. So maybe there's a truth to that. I do think we do have free will, even though on some level everything is pre-known as well. But I'm happy to have the conversation another time, but you have to get into very intense Kabbalistic theology and understanding of different levels of God to really work that out.
I just wanted to say, I'm very glad you mentioned the verse, Borei et Hakol, that creates everything, and the original verse that has the et hara in there. I forget the exact language. Evil, and he creates evil, and how the rabbis softened that or generalized to say creates everything, because they and I think it's John Levinson who has a little book on the persistence of evil, and I forget the title, but that's part of the title, in which he talks about how we have this tradition that has much about confronting evil in the world and chaos in the natural order, and that how we are always domesticating it and taming it, as the rabbis, I think, are doing there. So it's very striking when it came in here. That's why I was glad actually that Norma raised the question, because it ties so much together. And in the translation, in the new JPS translation that we have, it says, who causes all things to happen, but it simply says, as Alter says, who does everything. I think that's more literal, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, ascetical. And yeah, so it's very striking to me.
Well, when we talk about the development of thinking about God, we usually say that to the ancient Israelites in the Torah and the Bible, the biblical Jews accepted that God did bad things too, right? Right? You cause the rain to come, and you cause the rains not to come. And they tried to understand, why are you doing this? But for them, God was behind all things. And I sometimes think about other religions. In Hinduism, they have no trouble, right? They have the part of God that destroys, and the part of God that creates, and the part of God that preserves, and all of those are part of divinity, because that's just part of what happens in our world. But for us, we have this thing, well, if God is good, how can he destroy? If God is good, how can he create trouble? And so that's one of the big questions that pose, for the last 2,000 years has been leading us to say what Norma said, which is, how can God cause all things to happen? How can God cause evil to happen? Isn't God good? Why would God do that to us? And so according to philosophy, you have three or four questions, 3 or 4 answers. One, you can say that God does not make it happen, or you can say God is not all powerful, so things happen that are beyond God's control, or you can say that God can't see everything, or you can say that God is not all good. Or I add a fourth, which is you can't understand the actions of God, which is the traditional Jewish understanding of it. You can't always understand the actions of God, but that does not satisfy philosophers in any way, because they say if you can't understand God, then what's the point of even trying to say anything about God? Let's move ahead. Sow your seed in the morning and don't hold back your hand in the evening, since you don't know which is going to succeed, the one or the other, or if both are equally good. So this is often understood as, in your youth, sow your seeds. And when you're older, don't hold back from giving out. That's as a metaphor. Anybody want to say anything about this verse? Do your best in whatever you do. I won't tell you what Rashi says about this. It's not very uplifting. Okay. Next verse is a great verse. How sweet is the light! What a delight for the eyes to behold the sun. Even if a man lives many years, let him enjoy himself in all of them, remembering how many days the days of darkness are going to be. The only future is nothingness. How sweet life is, the beauty of life, just enjoying the sweetness of light, just enjoying the sun. This morning, as we started, Norma was saying, what a beautiful day it is, right? Just to enjoy the light on your face, going out and taking in the light, or taking in the light of a beautiful situation, the experience of light, of lighting your Shabbos candles. That's not what he means, but the light, and the sun and life, symbol for the beauty of life. Just take it all in, enjoy all of it, because the way he's thinking, which I disagree with, and later Judaism disagree with, he says, well, once you're dead, you're going to be in the darkness forever. But we don't believe that. We believe you go to even more light, but that still doesn't mean you shouldn't enjoy the light in this world. But it is true. We don't know what's going to happen afterwards. We have our theories, but we don't know what's going to happen for sure after you die. And even beyond that, in our life, there's many moments and periods of darkness. So when you have the chance to just enjoy the light, enjoy the light, enjoy life. We see how our l'chaim, right? This is l'chaim. L'chaim means to life. So, how does the Filler of the Roof song go? To life, to life.
L'chaim, to life. I think.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's move on then.
Sweet. What these verses through the end of the chapter remind me of is when I was in my early 30s, I was really, really frugal because I wanted to buy a house, and I was being extremely frugal, saving up money for a down payment and that sort of thing. And I remember talking to this older man, and telling him what I was doing, and he said, saving is really good. I mean, that's a great thing that you're doing this, but don't be so frugal that you don't live life now as well and enjoy it in the meantime. You should enjoy life throughout the entire process. So continue to save, but also give yourself some enjoyment and pleasure now. And that's what all of this is reminding me of as we read it.
Beautiful, thank you. Well, it's a fine balance between making sure you're sowing for the future and also living in the now. And I think the end of this chapter really does quite a beautiful job in expressing both those sides of, okay, live life fully and be totally enjoy your youth and enjoy all days and enjoy the light, but also don't be a fool and take it too far, right? Because God is gonna call you to account for all things. So it's enjoy it, but don't go over the top. Don't go over the top about it. And if we link it to what we said earlier, the idea of the way things are going to just be, you can't predict what life is going to do. You can't predict what trees are going to fall, where they're going to fall, and the rain is going to fall, where it's going to fall. And there's going to be unforeseen things are going to happen, and you're going to work really hard to save for your house, and then you'll find that a family member is going to leave you some money, and then you'll be able to buy the house earlier, or you never know what's going to happen, or maybe the stock market will crash and all your savings will disappear, and we just can't foresee everything. But on the other hand, you got to prepare for your future. So I see all of that in these verses. So the next verse is, "O youth, enjoy yourself while you are young, and let your heart lead you to enjoyment in the days of your youth. Follow the desires of your heart and the glances of your eyes, but know well that God will call you to account for all such things." It does seem to be a little contradictory, right? He's saying enjoy it all, but then you're going to have to pay for it.
What does he mean, call you to account?
There's no free lunch.
Well, are you sure it means that? I mean, it could mean something else. I don't know exactly, but the notion is that God is going to punish you for the enjoyment that you have here on the earth as a youth. That's what it seems to mean, but I don't believe it.
Well, the Hebrew is literally, God is going to bring you into judgment.
No, that means a negative judgment, or it means maybe it's just a judgment. It doesn't necessarily have to have a negative value to it, although people most often give it a negative value. Could be, hey, you've done very, very well. I see that you've had intercourse with dozens and dozens of women, and you've done this and you've done that, and you've enjoyed your senses and the whole thing. You've been a good fellow. I mean, I'm just playing with you, but it could be that too.
I mean, there's two ways of looking at it. One is saying, go enjoy yourself, but know that you will, if it's out of control, right? If you do, enjoy yourself. But if it's too much out of control, then, if you're completely out of control in your youth, then you're not going to be able to buy your house, right? You're not going to be able to do the things you wanted to do. On the other hand, what it could also be saying is you're going to have to pay for it anyway, so you might as well enjoy yourself. You're going to have to. You're going to have to pay for all of it anyway, so just go for it.
I struggle a lot with, evil in the world. I'm sure we all do. And, what I think with this, like Psalm 73 is a psalm I go to a lot when I'm really struggling with it. I see people doing evil things because it talks about, evil and evil people. And I was questioning, like, how can this be? And what's the benefit of being a good person, etc. And, but then he comes up with the answer. And I think, for me, what this whole chapter is really saying, it probably goes back to even the first verse with casting your bread upon the water, because, if you enjoy life, but you hurt other people in the process, and you actually use people to enjoy yourself in this life, then there is a negative judgment, I think. But if you enjoy life and you're generous at the same time, there's a positive judgment. So we'll be called to account for how we live this life. That's what I see in it.
Beautiful. I really like that. And I think it moves us into a nice place to talk about the book as a whole, and the idea of, King Solomon is king who, he let himself enjoy many things. And I'm not sure as a king in those days, how, but now he's at the end of his life, and look where he's coming from. Look at how sour he is, and how much pain he's describing, and how empty he's seeing it all to be. And so he's saying, enjoy it, but even here he is as a king, and he's in his older age. And what did it give him? It was all fleeting. It was all nothingness. He took it to the utmost. And maybe if he'd sent a few more pieces of bread down the stream, had a few more friends around and a few more family members who loved him, he'd be less sour. I don't know.
He had a sense of humor by saying black hair fleeting, pledging to getting old. I thought that was lighter than his usual stuff.
Sure. Yeah, right. Black hair is fleeting. Yeah, it's a very concrete image, right?
Yeah.
And but it's very biblical. One of the ways of saying you're getting old in the Bible is by saying in good gray hair.
It's funny.
Yeah.
But it's more humorous than it usually does.
Yeah. Definitely.
Oh, so I started going gray at 18. What does that mean?
You're wise. Well, the famous there's a story from the Haggadah, which is the prayer book we use for our Passover Seder. So on our holiday Passover, right, there's a we go through a whole liturgy at the table, and one of the stories is of a rabbi who becomes rabbi very young, and everybody's like, hey, how can you be a rabbi? And then he's only 18 and he becomes the head of all the rabbis, and then a single gray hair comes into his beard, and everybody says, okay, you're good to go. So it's he's 18 or 19, I can't remember. So you're in good company, showing early wisdom.
I was taught actually that every gray hair is a useless thought. So which also speaks of wisdom. The kind of thoughts that are wisdom are useless thoughts. But anyway.
And apparently I have quite a few.
Well, I do too.
So and banish care from your mind, and pluck sorrow out of your flesh, for youth and black hair are fleeting. It's one way I kind of like to look at it in the context of everything we've seen, again, is life is so unpredictable. And when we get into such a rage about certain things, and then we find, why did we even, years later, we look back and say, why did we worry about that? Or why did we worry about this? And why did we get into such a whole thing about that? And, life is long and it's unpredictable, and you don't, so enjoy it, but don't enjoy it too much. Make sure you life, your trees are going to fall and the rain is going to come, but make sure you sow, but don't spend your whole time thinking about sowing. Also think about being in the present. And it's a very kind of thoughtful vision of a life with perspective, and a life with thoughtfulness. And to me the most important verse is, sweet is the light, and how good for the eyes to see the sun. Just enjoy the sweetness of the light, and keep doing that. But you still have to eat, so make sure you sow. Take care of yourself, and take care of your physical needs, and take care of your body, and take care of your food, and make sure you have people, you've helped them out, so they'll help you out, and then it will be as it is, and everything is fleeting, but there's also a lot of sweetness within all of it. And in that sweetness, and maybe also to take it back to the beginning, in the casting of the bread for others, there's also meaning to be found, right? Maybe that's why that verse is also powerful to us, because sweet is the light, that's where meaning's to be found. But maybe there's also meaning to be found in, it's not only utilitarian, but there's also meaning to be found in casting bread into the water. So thank you, everybody. And we only have one chapter left. So I think we're going to finish the book next time. And where I'm left at this moment, one chapter before the end, is that I'm somewhat struck by King Solomon's humility, right? If this is King Solomon, this is not a bombastic meditation on, how great he is and all the things he's accomplished and how wonderful he is. He's humbled, right? This is a humbled king at the end of his life. And it's a humbling view of life, but it's also a kind of a beautiful view of life. And it's a view of life that that has perspective, and it's not going to one extreme or the other, but saying, live a good life and enjoy yourself and take in the light and help others and be there and don't be wise. Don't be a fool, but also don't spend too much time trying to be the wisest. Don't spend too much time trying to be the best. Don't spend too much time trying to own the most land or trying to, just try and focus your life on what's meaningful in there. So we'll continue this conversation next time. We have 14 more verses left to the whole book of Ecclesiastes. I hope everybody has a wonderful day and see you next week.
Rabbi,
Next week is
before
Oh, yes,
everybody goes,
Yeah.
next Thursday is Purim.
You're
Are we
right.
going to have a class?
We're not, you're right. Sorry, I forgot. We're going to meet in 2 weeks. Next week is Purim, so we're not going to meet. So we'll meet in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Happy Purim. Hope everybody comes to at least one of our events. Bring your Persian costumes. And the hamantashen this year are homemade by Wes. So they'll be extra good. So if you want good hamantashen, order them from the synagogue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Okay.
Rabbi, thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.